Wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. We have got an agenda that we're going to follow. Well, we'll follow it every time, but something that I think we can decide what we want to do here at the beginning. We've got a lot of information that we want to go through as we use this meeting kind of to get organized, to get introduced to each other, understand what our charge is, what our role is. And we'll be following parliamentary procedure. Now, we can, if we'd like, at this first meeting, have a motion to approve the agenda, but we do not need to do that. I'd like to do that at other meetings as we, get going and kind of get more professional into the groove of how we do this. But I also, if someone feels like they would like to approve the agenda, we can do that. Otherwise, we can just kind of.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I move to approve the agenda as stated.
Okay, look at you two. No one's going to need any help with any of this. Thank you. So the motion has been made and seconded to approve of the agenda. Are there any questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are unanimous in favor of approving the agenda. It helps to have folks that have done these things before, particularly a board chair down there on the end with Jason. So as Scott Graff mentioned, we are being live streamed, and so we'll talk a little bit about what that means as far as open meeting laws and some things here in a little bit. But really to get to know each other, as all of you know, you are appointed by different officials, elected officials, some of you by the governor, some by the Senate Pro Tem, and some by the Speaker of the House. And I don't know if any of you have already known each other before coming here today, but I thought it would be valuable for all of us as we're going to spend some time together and discuss and talk, to share a little bit and kind of do some introductions. And so, Laura, can I ask you to start?
Sure. My name is Laura Milton, and I am a teacher in Idaho Falls, and a mom of two, 5th grader and 4th grader now. So
School is out?
school is out. We made
Nice.
it.
And what do you teach?
I teach 4th grade.
Okay. Wonderful. And Idaho Falls. Okay. Wonderful. All right. Joni.
Joni Shepherd. I'm from Riggins, Idaho, and I have 3 boys, one of which is an 8th grader. The other 2 are graduated. I have homeschooled all my kids at some point in their school career, and I help out at the public school.
Nice.
Coaching.
Thank you. And if you haven't been to Riggins, you need to go check out their at the high school, their weight room. There was a donation by a NFL. I went and visited, and that was a bit of I was like, whoa, this is awesome for Riggins.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll have to talk about that later, but that's kind of fun. Amy.
Amy Henry. I have 3 kids. I'm from Nampa, but born and raised in Boise. Graduated from Capitol High School. I taught for 14 years, primarily middle school math, but 3 kids, they've been in public school, private school, and now are homeschooled. One's 25, one's 18, just graduated from high school. And I have a daughter that'll be in 9th grade next year. Right now, I volunteer full-time during the session, and we passed some legislation last year, parental rights bill, and that was fun, lots of fun. And I guess that's enough for now, but I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you. Holly.
Hi, everybody. I'm Holly Cook. I'm from Blackfoot, Idaho. My dad was vice principal there for 25 years. My mom is a retired counselor from District 91 in Idaho Falls. And I have 2 kids. They're 11 and 13, finishing 6th and 7th grade. Go to a public charter and a traditional public school. Really thrilled to be here. I think this is just an awesome program and just an honor and a privilege to be part of this group. So thanks for having me. Oh, I live in Boise and I work for Boise Chamber.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jason Seavey. I'm born and raised in Marsing, Idaho. I graduated from Marsing, and now I'm the board chair of the school district. I have been with the school for 6 years on the board, and I also have helped with the CASA board for 4 years. I also sat on the Idaho executive board for the School Board Association, and I'm one of the strongest advocates for parents' rights on that board, and that's most of the reason why I'm sitting here. I have an 8-year-old daughter who's still in school, and I have 2 older siblings that are out of school by now.
Thank you, Jason.
Wonderful. My name is Courtney Abendroth, and I'm from Rupert. I've been in education my whole life. I have a bachelor's degree from BYU, a master's degree from Harvard, and I am an adjunct professor for CSI in BYU, Idaho, as I raise my children. My youngest will now be a first grader. My oldest is a sophomore. They go to traditional public schools, but I'm an advocate for education because I believe it's the great equalizer, and truly exporting intellectual capital is what's going to make our country great going forward.
Thank you, Courtney. Barbara.
I'm Barbara Schreiber from Sandpoint. I moved there in 2002. I have 2 sons, 13 and 15, just finishing up 8th grade and their freshman year. You guys have quite the pedigree. I'm a business owner, but I've been involved in education in the schools for at least the last decade, just from anything from PTO to just actual community support for our schools.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'll formally introduce myself. So Debbie Critchfield, I was elected as state superintendent in November, and so took office January 6, 8, something like that, the first part, first part of January. And like many of you, have had a lot of experience in education as my adult life. And my husband and I raised our 4 kids in a small rural school in Oakley. And I served as a trustee for Cassia County School District for a number of years and participated in a number of statewide efforts, very similar, some things like this. And that really piqued my interest to pursue a different role, to support all of the things that we've talked about: teachers, parents, students, our communities. This is how we build our state. This is how we develop the future citizens of our country. And I'm really just, every day is a great day to be a part of this work. And so I'm excited and look forward to working with all of you as you bring your experience, knowledge, passion to the table. I'm excited for the products that we'll be able to produce and present to the board. So at Board of Education, I know there's a lot of boards. So that's a perfect segue for us to talk about and just remind ourselves, what are we here for? Why is it that this panel has come into being, and what are we going to talk about? So in your folders, you'll see this sheet, our Empowering Parents Advisory Panel. And we just want to run through this, and if there's any specific questions, which based on the intros and what we've already done, I think we're going to have smooth sailing as we go through all of this. I did think that it would be useful for us just to review exactly what the panel is charged with. And we're taking this straight out of Idaho Code, and we'll talk a little bit more about the history as to how we got that into statute and what the Empowering Parents program will provide for our state and our students. But I want to just, on the purpose, that Article 2, it is, the program itself is housed with the State Board of Education, so they manage the program, they have oversight of that. And our work is to provide recommendations to the Board of Education for their consideration. And so as we discuss and decide and formalize what we think the board should consider, I just want us to be refreshed in knowing that those things, I'll take them to the board for their October meeting. So our goal is to have our recommendations finalized in September, and then have a formal at the State Board of Ed's meeting, which they'll meet in Lewiston in October. And I know I'm jumping way ahead, but we can talk about, this group being there, what that looks like, what the presentation will be like. But ultimately, that's where that will go. And then the board will be able to consider what they're doing, what's the work of the panel, and what they want to do with those things. And so the board has the ability to do that. Then something else that's also a part of the statute And we'll have some more information on that as we have a complete audit that's available of the program that, parents, we've had this in place in a form already. And so we've asked that there be an audit of, what the money was spent on and, how where did it go to and so forth. In the process of parents applying or using their funds, there were some that were rejected. And so this group will also have an opportunity to say, hey, we think that should have been approved. And you'll be able to take a look at that as well. So those are the two big jobs. I think the timing, I know that the timing is good for this discussion for a couple of reasons. One, we now have the Empowering Parents program as an ongoing program. So during this last legislative session, the governor recommended to the legislature that $30 million be appropriated for empowering parents as an ongoing program. And the legislature approved of that. And so having a couple years that we've kind of already done this in the state, and now that we know that it's going to be ongoing money, I think it's very appropriate that we initiate the panel, get folks together. We're going to talk about what should it look like? What do we want this program to accomplish? What are we after? How are we going to support parents supplementing the education of their child? What does that look like? And there may be other things that you come up with, but that's the I guess the sideboards that we're going to put up. I am confident that we will be, there will be other educational things that kind of go from that, but we're going to try to keep us right in this the context of what do we want this program to look like. And again, with the timing of it becoming something that's ongoing money, it makes sense to me. And so that's how we'll proceed with that. Any questions on that as far as our charge and how we're going to go forward?
K-12, right?
K-12, thank you. Yep, K-12. And later in the morning here, we'll get into some of the, the details of the history and the who, and you'll see some information, in your folders. Again, just a quick, in Article 3, you'll see how the parent panel was, the membership and the selection of that. So you can take a look at that. And I was asked to serve as chair just by the governor, and the Board of Education was agreeable to that, and I am on that board as well. And so you can see your eligibility here and your service, and and how all that came to pass. All right, and then this part, and again, it sounds like this group is already in line and in tune with some of these things, but just how we want to run our meetings. And I'm not going to go step by step, but I think most of us are familiar with, the form of parliamentary or Robert's Rules of Order. And we will have a lot of opportunity. I think that's one of the benefits of having a smaller panel, is that there's lots of opportunity for people to share, discuss, offer their opinions, experiences, etc. And you can count on me to make sure that if you want to say something, you're going to be able to discuss that. And again, that's what we're here for. We're here for the conversation. And then how do we frame the next meeting? And we'll talk about that later in the morning too. After we've kind of gone through this day, be thinking of what are things that you would like to have as we move to the next meeting to really discuss what should this be. We took a stab at the things that we thought, our team, what we thought you might want to have. Okay, well, I'm sitting in this chair, what would I want to know right now? But you will likely think of other things that we can provide for you, or that we hope to be able to provide for you. Any questions on this? I think this looks fairly cut and dry. I thought it might also be nice for us that, as this is kind of our guiding principles here, that we have a motion on this, that we accept that this is what we're here for, this is how we're going to operate. Would anyone like to make a motion to accept this?
Madam Chair, I move we accept the guiding principles as stated.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Amy. Any questions, discussion of the motion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? I think we're unanimous, but I'm going to ask. All right, we are unanimous in favor. Thank you. We've got our charge and our guiding principles going. All right. Well, we are, because you're all pros, we're not going to take a break because I think we're probably good here in about 15 minutes if we kind of keep going. I know we're way ahead. Scott, are we close to? Okay. Well, do we want to? We know we have some time certain folks. We wanted to take a little bit of time just to discuss the open meeting laws to make sure that we all understand that and it's a good review. We want to be very transparent in how we do this and make sure that we understand the do's and don'ts as we get together. So maybe, let me think here. Is there any way we could have Danny come up? Can we? On the agenda that we approved,
Still the same content.
okay, but we could be okay to move something up? Okay. Okay, we'll bring Danny up here now. And
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I would move to amend the agenda. Danielle Woods to the next order of business.
Yeah, I'll second that.
thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion of the motion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And I could look at you all. We are unanimous in favor of that. Thank you for that. All right, well, we'll just, we'll wait for her to come up. These are some of those logistical things that we just kind of wanted to get out of the way so that we can get into the discussion part. You were also quick on your intros. You're all too bashful about what you're doing. So are you District 91 or 93?
91.
Okay.
I work at Dora Erickson.
Oh, okay. I have been, that's one of the older schools in the district. Isn't it?
It's one of the new, it's the first of the newest 4 buildings, the elementary school wise. It was a really, really old building
That you,
apparently
okay, that got updated.
before I was
Okay.
there.
I know that I was at that school.
I used to work at Edgemont and they're the exact same layout.
Okay.
So every once in a while it'll still mess me up. They're
Okay.
identical. This one's just burnt orange and the other one's red.
Okay.
It's not one of the other 2 that are mirrors though. The people that moved from those buildings get even more messed up. Just straight.
Huh, interesting.
So all 4 are real similar.
All 4 of them are, as far as I know, identical, except for the 2 that are mirrors. Is the only. But they're like 10 years old now.
Okay.
So
And how
they're
long have you been there?
new. This was my first year at Dora, but I taught at Edgemont for 6, 7 years. I spent a year online after COVID.
Nice.
I love,
Okay.
I think I finished my 11th year
And all
teaching.
in the 5th grade?
No, I taught 3rd. and I
Okay.
taught kindergarten.
All right. While we're waiting, we're just gonna dive into all your personal lives for the
It's
public.
totally fine.
No, it's good to know. I love the education focus. It's perfect.
Those are the best years. I
I-
volunteered so much in elementary school and those were my favorite.
I was
grades
always-
to work in.
I was so nervous going from kindergarten to 3rd. I was like, I don't know, they're big.
That's
They're not. Kindergarten, but now I can't go back. 3rd grade, 4th grade, like they're so fun.
Our 3rd grade teacher at the school my kids went to, she said it's
Elementary
the
school.
unicorn year.
Junior high was
They're
so
like
easy for
little
me.
people, like I'm not argumentative.
8th grade was
Not yet. Or but they are, but like they're not serious about it yet.
once I hit 7th.
And you
What
just
might
like.
make sense, but I think would be helpful, particularly for people online. Why don't we, would someone like to make a motion just to recess our meeting until we get our folks here and then, okay, thank you, Laura. Second, Barbara, all in favor, discussion of the motion? All right, all in favor of recessing until we get our presenter up here? please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are, oh, never mind. Okay,
It's
well
good
done.
practice.
All
Great
right, it
practice.
is great
Good job.
practice. You guys are such pros. All right, well, would someone make a motion to put us back into the meeting? All right, Laura has made the motion to put us back into our meeting. Second, thank you, Holly. Discussion of the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are unanimous. Danny, surprise, we're ahead of schedule.
I know, I ripped the Band-Aid off this morning, I love it.
So thank you. Why don't you come, you know what, let's put you at the head of the table. And
My introverted panic attack. I'm really good at it.
this is a friendly crowd. No, and you're here to help us and just, the goal, we will, provide whatever help and, travel needs as we go around the state. I guess we'll just kind of preface what Danny's going to talk about. We will meet and we'll talk about this here later in the morning, but our plan is to be in Twin Falls, the Idaho Falls / Rexburg area, and then Lewiston. And as we do that, then we will want, if you want to be face to face, we will help make that happen. And what that will look like, Danny will talk to you, or if you're driving, or just, whatever the reimbursements, whatever the travel logistics are. So Danny, have a seat, please.
Thank you. I'm Danny. I'm in accounting, so if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I can have Taylor or somebody share my contact info with all of you. You should have had two forms, I believe, given to you. They're a W-9 and a travel reimbursement form. If you've never been reimbursed by the SDE before, please take the time to fill out that W-9. The State Controller's Office will require that information to pay you for your travel and your time. The travel reimbursement form is how we document the travel that you undertook to be here today. It's fairly self-explanatory, but a few things I'll point out is the information on the top of the form should match the information that you provide on that W-9. And the address should match because we're a little old-fashioned and we pay you by check, which is actually quicker than any other payment method. So we like our paper around here. As far as filling it out, you'll definitely want to include any mileage that you drove and the times that you left and arrived, and any other expenses, if you undertook any lodging, parking, things like that. I'm happy to go over each of your forms, and when we pay you, I'll certainly be reviewing them. Otherwise, it's any questions that you have about the form that may not be self-explanatory.
Doesn't sound like it. This is a professional group. We've learned that in the last 18 minutes. So yeah, any other, okay. And as Danny said, if you do run into any troubles, you can get a hold of her, and I know Taylor has been working with everybody, and I think everyone met Taylor.
Yes.
So thank you, Taylor and Allison, for getting all of this. I don't know where Allison went, but getting everything put together. So if you have any questions on that, and even before we leave here today, we can go wrangle Danny back up here and help just make sure we've got everything filled out. And then, yes, that as she said, you'll get a check in the mail from our controller. So
one last thing I forgot to mention is please be sure to sign both forms. We do need real signatures. So if for some reason you prefer to do that digitally, an Adobe sign signature or something that is authentic is also acceptable. But the state controller does really look for those real signatures. So
okay. All right. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, that looks great.
While we are talking about travel, this might, well, I'm trying to think if, you know what, we'll wait. Well, no, let's talk about it now. It's just a real quick. I want to get, as we're thinking of, going around the state, and one of the, I guess one of the opportunities that we wanted to create as we go into regions was for folks to be able, that aren't on the panel, that have opinions about it, for you to be able to hear from other people as we travel the state. Is that something that's valuable and important to you as well? Okay,
Yes.
I figured that it would be, but I didn't, want to say we're not or we are. And so just kind of talk about that with you. So as we go to each of, the other three locations, and again, we tried to, get as central into regions as we could. We will have, we can set aside an hour. I'm just going to throw that out, maybe an hour that as part of the meeting that folks can come and talk to you. And we can do, there's a couple of ways that we can accommodate this. One that I think I would prefer, and it just makes it a little more organized, that we'll put something out that if you plan on being in Twin Falls, you just click onto the, Empowering Parents website, and then you sign that you don't have to say what you're going to talk about or what time you're going to be there, but you have an intent that we let people know. So we kind of have an idea of who we think is going to be there. Now, I recognize that there will be people who may come, and I don't want to turn anyone away, especially if somebody, drove an hour and we say, well, you didn't sign up online. That will accommodate folks, but also have some kind of a procedure or something in place on that we let people know that you can come and address the panel, and we just want to have a name so that we have an idea of how to plan. But does an outlet, if we were to maybe package in an hour, what do you think about that? Does that, I don't know how many people will be there, and we can look at how we want to do this. Jason?
Yes, an hour is fine, but I do think you need to limit the amount of time somebody can speak as well.
Okay.
And so if you limit it to 5 minutes and up to an hour, and then, so somebody doesn't take half the time.
Okay. Totally good with that. And I was thinking that same thing. Does 5 minutes sound reasonable that someone could get through?
Yeah. But the behest of the chair, you could always, if it
Oh, sure.
needs to be more, we can
Okay.
grant more, but at least give somebody a time frame.
Okay.
What they expect coming in.
All right.
I think that's a great idea, and we could try that the first meeting, and if we need to make adjustments.
Sure.
from
We can do
the
that
next-
to the
we
next
always
one.
can. I mean,
Absolutely.
we do
Yeah.
Okay.
Always.
All right. So we'll put something on our website. We know for Twin Falls where we'll be, and we'll get and we can put all that stuff on there. Ask with the form, and then all of you will have that list. We'll be able to know. It's not who is there, but how many, so that we can understand that. But I think limiting it to a time frame is wise for us as we get started, and then see.
Is there a way that there can be like public comments coming through? I had people find my
Written,
work
some
email
written,
already
okay.
and want to give me feedback.
Yeah.
They were like,
We can
And I
do,
just-
yep. Absolutely. Let's,
can we give them an avenue where they don't have to stalk me? Well, I want them to be able
yes,
to
no,
give
you
that
want them,
feedback,
yes.
but-
Well, okay, so let's talk
Okay.
about that.
It's really
I
good.
have so because I deal with the school board all the time, and same with
Yeah.
you. My school board email account is public knowledge, and anybody
Yeah.
can request anything in that email. So if you build a Gmail account that's for this committee, and then everything goes through that Gmail account, then if somebody requests that account, you can give them everything in it.
Okay.
And that's what
Yeah.
I do.
for public.
Then it would separate your work from.
All right, we're writing some notes. The people that matter are right behind me, so, okay. All right, so, a way to access our committee panel members that is not your personal email, which is completely fair. And I totally respect that, so that folks can have written comment from anywhere in the state. Then as we go to each region, we'll have an opportunity for folks to address you publicly. What else, as far as the public input side, are we missing, or would you think about? Go ahead.
Just to piggyback on what we were saying for public comment, is there a way to say, okay, we're gonna do it a range of 3 to 5 minutes based on how many people sign up? I'm just thinking that some areas might have more people, and
Okay.
if we
Say
tell
up,
them 5
up
minutes?
to 5 minutes, or okay, like from 3 to 5, depending on
I'm
how
just
many.
thinking if some people say, you told me I'd have 5 minutes.
Ah, gotcha.
And if we have more
Then
people
we don't
sign up.
lock
So
it
just
in.
some
Okay.
flexibility.
All right,
I've seen people use every minute.
are we good with that? Kind of just reading people as we look around the room, okay? No, that's smart. Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I just, thought that maybe it might be helpful if we give the public some direction about what we're seeking from them, and so that it's within the scope of our duties.
Okay.
So maybe just something along the lines of feedback concerning implementation, just the 3 words. I can't remember which article it's in here, but you know, the implementation, recommendations, et cetera.
Okay, I like that.
So we keep the comments limited to what we can.
Or at least try to.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's great. I'm gonna quit taking notes. Is that okay? Because I know, all right.
Okay, Madam Chair.
Like running out of room on it.
Also, if we have a group of, like an organized group that fill up the box of speaking and it's all about the same topic, we need to have a way to have them pick a representative and then they speak for the group.
Okay,
Sometimes you'll get 10 people that want to say the exact same thing and then they'll fill up the whole public speaking time. And so I think that's, we have some kind of procedure for that, that'll help us if we get into that situation.
sure. We can do that. And I know we see that a lot during the legislative committee hearings, that you'll get a similar theme. Just maybe just a little bit of a different color to it, but it's the same basic message. Okay. Other thoughts on the public side? And as it's been pointed out, we have the ability to be flexible. If in Twin Falls, if we say, hey, that worked really well, or oh, we missed something, then we can make an adjustment when we go over to Eastern Idaho the next time and try to capture, some of this other. Okay. Let's see. We are, Scott, about 15-ish minutes from
Christine, the Deputy Attorney General.
on her way. All right. Well, then we'll just kind of hang out here for a minute. I would say we could go into recess, but should we do that? Okay, why don't we do that? This one will really stick for a minute. So anyone want to make a motion to recess?
Yeah, I motion that we go into recess.
Thank you, Amy. Second by Joni. Any discussion of the motion?
You have to have like a time limit on your recess, or can you say an indefinite recess?
Yeah, just till we come back.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if the Deputy Attorney General corrects me when she comes back in, but I don't think so.
Okay.
So thank you for the question. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are unanimous. We will go into recess and reconvene as soon as we have our next presenter. Second, and I can do. All right, well, our presenter is here, and so are you good?
I'm good if I've got my.
Good to go? All right. And so why don't we'll have a motion to reconvene as our panel. Thank you, Laura. Second by Joni. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, we are reconvened. And we will give Christine a moment to get organized. I'm sure that many of you are, if not all of you, are familiar with the open meeting laws, but it's a great opportunity to refresh that and really establish that we make the transparency of what we do a priority. And so Christine Moriarty is the Deputy Attorney General that is assigned to the State Department of Education. And so we appreciate her coming and her expertise.
Right, thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you.
As she said, I'm Christine Moriarty and I work at the Attorney General's office. The presentation I'm going to give you today
Yes, have a seat.
And I think I'll sit
Please
down
do.
since everyone
Yes,
else
yes.
is seated, if that's okay. The presentation I'm gonna give you today was prepared by the Attorney General's office, and I've tried to pare it down a little bit to make it applicable to this group, to the Parent Advisory Council. This first slide shows a picture of the Idaho Open Meeting Law Manual, which will be a handy reference for anybody who has questions about the law going forward, in addition to reaching out to our office. But the manual contains the law in full, and it also has a frequently asked questions section that goes over some real world scenarios. So that is a resource that you can utilize. Have any of you facilitated or participated in meetings under the open meeting law before?
Everybody.
Okay. Very good.
Based on the intros, I would say everyone.
Okay, very good. And hopefully this is just a refresher. Okay, so the presentation, where do I need to click? The space bar? just the space bar. Okay, thanks. Okay, the presentation's broken down into 5 parts, and we're first going to talk about some definitions and then what needs to happen before the meeting, which are the notice and agenda, what needs to happen during the meeting, circumstances that allow for an executive session, and finally enforcement of the open meeting law. The open meeting law guarantees the rights of it guarantees the rights of Idahoans to observe their action in government. So it's based on the premise that the formation of public policy is public business and shall not be conducted in secret. So the goal is to allow for government's business to be conducted in public, which is beneficial to both citizens and public officials. When people don't know what's going on, in the absence of information, sometimes people can take a negative inference from that. And so with open meetings, citizens, people in the public can see the deliberation of competing ideas amongst government officials and see how the government arrives at the decisions that it's made. So the open meeting law is a statute, meaning it's a law passed by the legislature. It can be found in Idaho Code Title 74, Chapter 2. So whenever the legislature creates a statute that contains definitions, those definitions are what controls. Even if the words are something that could be defined on a daily basis, you know, everybody could say that they know what the word decision means. But if it's defined in the statute, that's the definition that controls. The statutory definition for a particular term isn't, if it isn't provided, then the common meaning or what you would find in the dictionary controls. Okay, so under the open meeting law, 2 definitions determine when a public agency needs to have an open meeting. The first definition is decision. So anytime a governing body is going to make a decision on an issue, it needs to be done in an open meeting. So that means any determination, action, vote, or final disposition upon a motion, proposal, resolution, or a measure on which a vote is required at any meeting where a quorum is present. So basically, if you have a quorum and you're deciding things, that's a good indication you should be in an open meeting. The second definition we're going to talk about is deliberation. So deliberation means the receipt or exchange of information or opinion relating to a decision. This doesn't include informal discussions of a general nature. So if your discussions or deliberations are the precursor to making a decision, those should be happening in an open meeting. That includes casual conversations between members of the council. So if you see a fellow council member at a social function and you discuss something upon which the Parent Advisory Council is going to decide, then that could be an open meeting violation. The same is true of text messages and email conversations, especially if the email is one where all members of the council are replying all and asking and answering questions between the members. If you're just scheduling a meeting or trying to decide what's going to be on the agenda, that does not need to be in an open meeting. The key is to not let your conversations stray and start discussing the merits of agenda items. Do you have any questions up to this point? Okay, so the open meeting law applies to public agencies, and any state entity that's created by statute or by a governor's executive order is probably a public agency, including any state board, committee, council, commission, department, authority, or educational institution. Because the Parent Advisory Council was created under statute, it is considered a public agency under the open meeting law. Okay, a governing body means members of any public agency which consists of 2 or more members with the authority to make decisions for or recommendations to an agency. Here you will be making recommendations to the State Board of Education. So next we have the definition of a meeting, which is the convening of a government body of a public agency to make a decision or deliberate toward a decision on any matter. So this definition refers to the other definitions that we just went over, and they all work together to facilitate the regulations in the statute. So there are 2 types of meetings. There are regular meetings and special meetings. Regular meetings are held on a fixed day by law or rule. Special meetings are called outside of that day for a specific purpose. Okay, so all meetings require a notice and an agenda, and I believe that the Department of Education will be assisting the council with those requirements. For regular meetings, you have to give at least 5 days calendar notice calendar days notice and 48 hours for the agenda notice. Notice is posted at the principal place of business or the meeting location, as well as online, as long as the governing body has an online presence, which the Department of Education and the Board of Education do. I understand that these meetings will be noticed through Town Hall Idaho as well. Be careful with your online notice. If you have a link for an agenda, make sure that the link takes people directly to the agenda. If someone clicks on a link and then they have to navigate through a website to find what it is they're looking for, that may not be compliant with the open meeting law. With special meetings, you can't hold them without at least 24-hour meeting notice and agenda notice unless an emergency exists. And the statute defines emergency as peril to life or limb or financial harm. So it should be measurable and urgent, and you should be able to articulate exactly why you could not provide the 24 hours notice. Okay, so executive sessions. You can have an executive session only meeting where members of the public cannot observe. You have to give 24 hours notice and state the reason and specific provision of law authorizing the executive session. Even if you have an executive session only meeting, you'll still have a short open meeting that will include a motion to go into the executive session, take a roll call vote, and those things need to be reflected in the minutes. And we'll talk a little bit more about executive sessions in just a minute. An agenda is required for each open meeting and is posted at the same place as the meeting notice. You are allowed to amend your agenda after it's been posted and even after the meeting is started. If you amend the agenda outside of 48 hours, you can just post the new agenda. If you amend it within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting, you need to post the fact that it's an amended agenda so people know that something has changed. Then once the meeting starts, you move to adopt the amended agenda. If you have to amend it within 24 hours or during the meeting, then you make a motion and have a vote on it. You should include in the minutes the good faith reason for needing to amend the agenda. Okay, so the agenda is required to have all probable topics of discussion. The open meeting law does not say how specific the agenda needs to be. We do encourage you to be specific, but understand that sometimes something general works. If you just have old business and new business, that's likely not compliant under the open meeting law. Any item on the agenda you're going to take action on is required to be identified as an action item. Once something is identified as an action item, you don't necessarily have to take action on it, but if it's not on the agenda, then you cannot take it up. If you end up needing more information, you don't need to take the vote. If you learn something new during the meeting that requires taking prompt action right then, you can amend the agenda to identify something as an action item, but make sure to have that declaration and the justification for doing so in the minutes. Recording those types of steps in the minutes protects the governing body going forward. So all open meetings have to be open to the public. And make sure that wherever you're holding the meetings, the public knows they can attend. The next element of that is that a government body shall not hold a meeting at any place where discrimination on the basis of race, creed, color, sex, age, or national origin is practiced. Okay, all open meetings can be conducted using telecommunication devices. However, Idaho's open meeting law does not allow for completely virtual meetings. When using telecommunication devices, you still have to have a physical place for the meeting and at least one board member, the executive director, or the chief administrator for that board present. You can have a meeting that has a capacity limit or one person there who is the speaker, but you cannot do the entire thing virtually. There was a short period of time at the onset of the pandemic where the governor suspended the in-person requirement, but that suspension of the requirement is long expired. If you are having a meeting that's going to be streamed, make sure that all of the meeting notices and meeting agendas have the link that the public can use to attend. If you have a capacity limit, be sure to include that on the notice so that the public is aware of what their options are going to be to join. Again, double and triple check that the links are working correctly. If the meeting starts and the link doesn't work, and therefore people who wanted to join the meeting can't, the meeting will have to be delayed, postponed until another time when it's working. Also, when you're in an open meeting, you cannot use email or text to conduct private conversations among your council. If you're texting your deliberations, that defeats the purpose of having the open meeting. Plus, those texts are likely public records, as are any other texts or emails related to the business of your council. So with that, I'd like to touch on public records for a minute. Like the open meeting law, the Idaho Public Records Law is in the part of the Idaho Code dedicated to ethics and government. And public records are defined as any writing containing information relating to the conduct or administration of the public's business. So this means it's the content of the record which determines whether it's public, regardless of the means. So even if you're using a personal email account or your personal phone to text, if you're conducting public business, those are still public records. So you want to ensure that anything you're texting or emailing is something that you wouldn't mind seeing in the newspaper. Writing includes under the definition of a public record. It includes but is not limited to handwriting, typing, printing, photographing, electronic data, text messages, emails, and every means of recording. So it's all inclusive. There is a distinction for personal notes. You do have the ability to take your own personal notes that cannot be viewed by the public, but if at any time you share them with another person or with the entity, the Board of Education, they then become a public record. And like the open meeting law, you can find more information about public records on the Attorney General's website. There is a manual for that law as well. Does anybody have any questions about public records or anything else?
I just want to make a note that we will have minutes of the meeting posted on the Empowering Parents website, so that at some following the meeting that someone who doesn't want to watch the Zoom or whatever, that they'll have access to what was discussed.
Okay, when conducting a meeting, you have to provide for the taking of written minutes.
Oh, there
That
we
will
go.
be available
I
to
didn't
the
even know, I
public.
just led you right in there.
Thank you for the segue. Required to be included in the minutes are the members of the council who are present, all motions, resolutions, orders, or ordinances proposed, as well as their dispositions. So essentially, if you have a vote on an action item, that should be recorded along with the results of the vote. That's the bare minimum of what's required, and the council can include more if you wish. Written minutes means written on paper or electronically recorded. A recording of the meeting in its entirety, whether it's an audio recording or a video, that does not constitute minutes. It needs to be broken down into the required sections. Further, the minutes have to be made available within a reasonable time after the meeting. So a reasonable time varies, but it kind of depends on how often your council is meeting. Governing boards that meet weekly need pretty quick turnaround for their minutes. If you're only meeting a few times a year and therefore have a pretty involved meetings, finalizing those may take a little bit more time.
And we'll have, if I can just interject something here, at the next meeting, we'll also have an action item to accept the minutes of the previous meeting. So you'll have an ability to see what's in there, make sure that you all feel good that that reflects what we discussed and everything, and then we'll get those posted.
Okay, so we briefly touched on executive sessions, and under the law, you are allowed to have an executive session where members of the public are excluded. You have to have a motion to go into the executive session that identifies a specific subsection of the open meeting law that authorizes it. And you have to have a roll call vote on the motion recorded in the minutes. So roll call means you call each individual council member. It cannot be a voice vote. And an executive session is authorized by a 2/3 vote of the council. I believe this council 7 members, is that right? So you would need to have 5 people vote in favor of going into the executive session. So a common question that our office gets is who goes into the executive session, and the council will get to decide that. It is important to note that executive session is designed to protect confidentiality. So breaching confidentiality is not a violation of the open meeting law, but it's a cautionary element for the council in deciding who goes into the executive session. The more people who are brought in, the harder it is to maintain confidentiality. So you might want them to be small in number of people and short in the length of time to avoid going off topic of what's supposed to be being discussed in the executive session. So there are 8 reasons under the law that justify going into the executive session. Each revolves around a specific element, and you should be able to identify something specific. If there's a general reason that you want to go into the executive session, there's probably a problem with doing that. I'm only going to cover, out of those 8, the reasons which I think might be applicable to this group. The first reason to go into executive session is to consider records that are exempt from disclosure. If you go in under this provision, there should be a specific record that you can point to that requires the discussion. And so that would be incorporating that public records law as well. Next, to discuss ramifications and options with legal counsel for pending litigation or controversies imminently likely to be litigated. So for example, if you have a lawsuit filed or you're likely to have a lawsuit, maybe a notice of tort claim has been received, that would be a reason to go into executive session with your legal counsel. It's not an exception to go into the executive session and just get general legal advice. There are also similar exceptions for risk managers and insurance providers with regard to settling or resolving claims that are already filed or likely to be filed. I couldn't think of any other reasons that they might go into
We're
executive
not
session under those.
considering real estate. I know
Right.
that.
Exactly.
Trying to think of what the
Yeah.
others are. I think that would be it too.
Okay.
And we don't have employees, so we're not doing any sort of
Right.
personnel discussions.
Yeah, okay. Sounds good. Okay, so the exceptions to the general policy for the executive sessions are narrowly construed. So if you're interpreting them in a way that broadens their reach, that's not going to be compliant with the law. As you go through the reasons to go into executive session, one of the best checks is to say, can we identify a specific item that we're discussing? If it's ever about something general that you just want to keep confidential, that should be a strong cautionary note that you should not be going into executive session. It's a violation of the law to change the subject of the executive session to one that's not identified in the motion or to a topic for which an executive session is not provided. If you're in an executive session and something new comes up, you can't change topics. You have to, if you need to deal with it right then, the solution is to go back out into the open meeting, amend the agenda, and include a new topic for the executive session, and then go back into the executive session after a roll call vote. You have to be really careful with executive sessions because it can be really easy to drift off topic. You have to ensure that everyone there is empowered to say, this is not what we're supposed to be talking about. We can't discuss that during this session. And we need to get it on the agenda and vote on the motion. So that's everyone's responsibility. And when we get to the enforcement of the law, there can be some ramifications for not following it, and we want to avoid those. Okay, so also under executive sessions, you cannot take final action while in an executive session. Once you get to the point where you can tell that you're reaching a consensus as a governing body, that's an indicator that you need to get out of the executive session. Then you can come out and say, we move to adopt the recommendation of our attorney in executive session, or something similarly general to maintain the confidentiality of the session, but keep the final action public in the open meeting. It also may be helpful to make a note in the minutes as to the times that the governing body went in and out of executive session. That way the public can see that the discussion behind closed doors took an appropriate amount of time. Similarly, if you're discussing more than one thing in the executive session, to note in the minutes how long each subject was discussed, for the same reason that you don't want the appearance that you could have been talking about things that you were not supposed to be while in the executive session. There must be a reference to the specific statutory subsection which authorizes the executive session in the minutes. But the minutes do not have to contain so much information that the purpose of going into the executive session is compromised. Are there any questions about executive sessions?
Yes. Is there any minutes taken during executive session?
Yes. So you would want to note like the times that you were discussing a specific topic, but you don't need to elaborate on what exactly was said.
So then you would break out, and then that would go into your general minutes.
Right, correct.
In a situation,
There's not a separate set of
yeah,
minutes.
there's not
for
a
the
separate set of
executive
minutes. That would
session.
be so. There's a couple situations where you, and this is a school board thing, but since you're here, I've wanted to ask this question.
Sure, ask away.
There's a couple situations where you can make a motion in executive session for confidentiality. How are those? One's a student expulsion, and one is a placing a teacher on leave or in. So how does those reflect in your minutes? You're still going to go student A, but during the executive session minutes?
You don't need to have separate minutes for the executive session. It would be the general.
It'd still be, but
Yeah,
you would still put the motion that you made during the.
Right, in general terms to protect the confidentiality, but enough to say what happened.
Okay.
Um,
So if you were like in executive session and you expelled student A, you would put executive session enter, motion made, student A expulsion for this time, and then executive, or then reconvene into open session?
Right, so I'm not familiar with that particular exception. You make the motion and decide that in executive
Yeah,
session?
it was a new law just passed 2 years ago, to protect students' rights. I actually
Sure.
worked on the statute. But there's like 2 exceptions in open meeting law where you can make motions in executive, and so, but I've always wondered how to make that also available elsewhere.
Right, I think you just keep it general to maintain the confidentiality, but identify that the motion passed or failed. You state what the motion was and then what the resolution of the motion was.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Normally, besides those 2 exceptions that you're identifying, normally you come out of executive session
And make
to-
that motion.
to make that motion. Yeah.
Which, that's the way I've always done it, but then
Yeah.
since we've got this passed to protect kids,
Yeah,
I'm trying to figure out how to make it work where it's still record, but it still protects.
right. I think as long as you're not specifically identifying the student,
You can still do student.
yeah, or using any other information that might identify the student, specificities as
Because
to,
it's always the issue in a really small district. You have,
yeah,
43 kids in the senior class. If one of them's getting expelled, they're all gonna know who it is. And so,
right,
that's where this whole thing came from. It's,
right. Well, I would say that's a separate issue from the public record of the minutes. Regardless of what's in the minutes, everybody in the class may know
it's all
who was expelled, but in terms of maintaining that confidentiality in the public record, not identifying the student, not using any other personally identifying information that would identify the student. And if for some reason it needed to be more specific, that would be something that would be redacted if it was ever
Out
released to
there.
the public, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, so we will move on to enforcement. Okay, so a few things regarding enforcement. If you don't comply with the open meeting law, that renders any actions taken during the meeting null. That is not self-executing, meaning someone has to say you violated the open meeting law to set aside the action. So that can be done by a judge or it can be done by the council itself. The council can say, we messed up on the open meeting law and we're setting aside that decision and we'll take up the matter in the future once we've had a properly held, properly noticed meeting. If you participate in a meeting that violates the open meeting law, you could be subject to a civil penalty paid by you individually. So the governing body or the governing entity does not pay any fines for an open meeting violation, but individuals that participate during a open meeting law where a violation is found can be made to pay a $250 fine or $1,500 if the violation was knowingly committed, and $2,500 for repeated violations within a 12-month period. The Attorney General enforces the open meeting law with regards to all the public agencies in state government. Prosecuting attorneys enforce it for their jurisdictions, meaning within their counties. Occasionally, a prosecuting attorney will ask the Attorney General's office to handle something, particularly if they have a conflict. The final consideration with enforcement is that any person who is affected by a violation of the open meeting law can bring an action against the governing body. So if a governing body decides something that affects a person's property, for example, and that person doesn't think that the open meeting law was complied with, they can bring a civil action, essentially a lawsuit, as an open meeting law complaint. The good news is you can also cure violations of the open meeting law. So if a violation is brought to the council's attention, steps can be taken to cure it. and it requires the governing body to recognize the violation has occurred and set aside the decisions that were made and then take appropriate actions to remedy what happened. A lot of times that means redoing the meeting with proper notice and having a properly held meeting. Once an acknowledgement of a violation has been made, the governing board has 14 days to take the steps to cure. And it can be difficult for governing boards to admit that they've made a mistake sometimes, but it is an easy way to get out of a violation before a complaint is filed and you find yourself in a more difficult situation. So once that acknowledgement has been made, all enforcement actions are on hold until the governing body has had a chance to cure the violation. Once the cure period is over, the complainant can resume enforcement actions. A cure can allow individuals to avoid the monetary penalty if the violation was accidental. However, it does not bar imposition of the penalty if the violation was done knowingly. So within the open meeting law manual that I discussed earlier, there are some charts and checklists to help governing bodies navigate some of these things. So the manual's on the Attorney General's website, which is ag.idaho.gov. And there's a drop-down box on the main page that will take you to information about various things, but two of those things are open meeting law and public records. So that can be a useful resource. So this chart is of the curing process. You can follow this to figure out how to cure any violation. This one is a checklist for conducting regular meetings, a checklist for conducting special meetings, a checklist for executive sessions, and an example of how to frame a motion and draft an order to go into an executive session. And this is an example of how to amend your agenda. So these tools are meant to help you comply with the open meeting law easily. And I just want to point out, since we just talked about the enforcement and the penalties, that the purpose of the law is to encourage citizens and encourage and incentivize the government to comply, and to encourage citizen interaction and involvement in government as well. It's not to litigate over open meetings. So our office wants to encourage you to be able to say, you know, if we messed up, this is what we can do to fix it. And, you know, everybody's goal is to be in compliance with the law. So that is all I have. I would just say, you know, you don't need to memorize any of this. There are plenty of resources out there. You know, we welcome questions at the Attorney General's office. They're the resources I mentioned on the website, and the law itself can be found on the Attorney General's website or on the legislature's website. And are there any other questions?
You will not have to worry about noticing of anything. We're not going to charge anyone in this group around this table to do that. We've got our team at the SDE that will do that. And obviously Christine specifically supports our work. And so it's our goal that we will not be in violation. We want to abide by all of those things, not because we're trying to check compliance boxes, but because we ultimately believe that this is a public process that we want to be available for our citizens and around the state. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And why don't let's take a break here, and I am going to make that time certain, Jason, because for people that are online, that is important. So I reconsidered that as you made that comment, and we'll want to do that. So it is 10:09. Why don't we come back here at, let's see, we'll take about 15 minutes, 10 or 16 minutes, 10:25, reconvene here. So if there's a motion to go into recess until 10:25.
I'll move that we go into recess until 10:25.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Laura. Any discussion or disagreement with that? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are unanimous in favor, so we will return at 10:25. And I'm going to just put our on mute. Okay. We are at 10:25, and so we will get started again. And we don't need a motion for that because we set a time. And so we'll just keep moving forward. All right, now, this is what we came here for, to begin our discussion on the program. And to set the stage of that, then we wanted to provide you with the background. I'm going to give you a history. It's brief, but nonetheless, how did we get to this place? And then we've asked, so Heather, is it you and Jen, or just?
Jen had planned on attending, but if
Well,
not,
we'll
yeah,
take
go.
you. We're happy to have you. Not
Thank
we'll
you.
take you. We're happy to have you. And then we'll have Heather talk about the program overview. How do people apply? What, all the nuts and bolts of that. And then we'll then transition to Joe, who I've not met, but he's on the screen with Odyssey to give us now that we've gone through the process of applying, it's been awarded, then what happens? On the Odyssey side, what do they do? A parent says, hey, we've got, we've been told that we've got this money, and then we'll have him explain what that looks like on the purchasing side, and just kind of to understand what the full process looks like as we went through it this last time. Okay, so with that, I just want to give you a brief history. In the summer of 2020, as we were, as a state, discussing what was school going to look like going back that COVID school year, and we had a goal of getting to be as in-person as possible, recognizing that local control would determine what that delivery looked like. We also had a conversation, we in this case would have been the State Board of Education, and I was the president at the time. And so we had a discussion on the various ways that this was going to take place. What were our concerns? Clearly the concern was that kids were being educated. And if we weren't able to, for a variety of reasons, that the boards made their decisions, if you weren't able to be a regular 5-day, which I don't know of any, well, maybe there was a school district or a school that was every day, 5-day business as usual, that I'm, again, not aware of that. How do we help our families and our students have as much information and contact with just what's available? So one of the things that was discussed with the governor's office was looking at, there were some grants, there were some federal grants that were available, and we also worked with some other education partners in the state that helped us apply for some federal grants specifically designed to provide monies to parents that would allow them choices to supplement the education. For some, that looked like a tutor. For some, that looked like, maybe they were paying for an online school, or a lot of things, as you can imagine, with all the people in the state and different ways of doing different things. There were a lot of things that were discussed. And so we went through the process as a state of applying for the grants. Ultimately, they were going to award 4, but then they ultimately only picked 2 states. And I think we were third or 4. Anyway, we're like, we were so close. But having gone through this process, then, with our Governor Little, he saw some merit to that. And you know what? If there was an opportunity to help support decision-making for parents when it came to the education of their child, this was the time to really think about how to do that. And so with the federal COVID money that came into Idaho, there was money that was set aside. $50 million, I believe, was the first round of it. And it was a program very much like what we have now. It went through a process that I won't get into because Heather's going to explain that. And then the monies were awarded to to the families. There was a vendor similar to what we have now, similar, not the same vendor, but a similar process of going through that. And so then it was very successful. And we saw a number of families access that. Some use their money to pay for internet because not being in school and not having the resources. And we saw, again, tutors. There was a lot of ways that parents and guardians were creative on how to help their kids. And so the next year, the program was also reliant upon federal dollars. And as that was finishing up, there was discussion on putting this into statute. And that's how we got, the first part we covered what the statute was. But that was one-time money. And so the key difference from last year or the first couple of years to where we're going to go forward is that now the legislature has dedicated monies, 30 million, that will go into the fund. And so that's the really quick version of not literally how did we get here at this table today, but how did the program come into being? And it did start as a response to needs that were available, we heard as a state during COVID. But I think we all learned that education needs and gaps are so different around the state that it really became an important tool for families to say, hey, this really helps me outside of the school setting to be able to, XYZ, fill in the gaps. And so as we, again, just look at where we're going to go from here, knowing that we've got money going into that, it is a great opportunity for us to say, here's where we've been. Is this what we want to still do? What are we missing in this? How do we create a really strong program that is fundamentally designed to support great choices within education for individual families and students? So questions on the history part? Pretty cut and dry that way. All right, well, with that, then Heather, we're going to pass the baton to you and you walk us through what it looks like when a parent says, hey, I hear there's a program.
Yes, I get those calls a lot. So my
Yes.
name is Heather Zeitlin. I am the Empowering Parents Grant Coordinator for the State Board of Education. So I don't know if anybody's already called my direct line, but I do get a lot of parent questions and I help manage the program. So just overall, the State Board of Education, it does administer the program, and in the statute, similar to how you guys are, charged with doing certain items, we are as well. So we administer the platform, and that is through a third party, and that is Odyssey. And Joe's up there on the call, and he is the president and founder of Odyssey. We establish the application process itself. We award the grants, so Odyssey or the vendor would, send us those people that they have deemed eligible through the application process, and we actually, process those invoices. And then we do reporting and evaluation. So we have to report out to the Senate around December 15th. That's in the statute. And then moving forward on every 2 years, we're going to do a more substantive evaluation of the program, and that's to be determined because other people are going to have input on what that would look like. So you guys were provided this in your packet, and so this is a report that similar to what we gave the legislature in December, and then I've just started updating it, and we'll do so monthly, but I wanted to kind of add to that. I know you guys are meeting again in July, right? So, I could make sure to get maybe the most up-to-date information for you guys. If that's something that you would want, you could just request that from me and I can get you.
Requested.
It's requested.
There you
Okay.
go.
So we'll get that to you. So then how does it kind of work moving forward? So that's what the state board does. And we, so how do people apply, right? So they will go to the platform, but first we have to talk about eligibility because that really was a sticking point in the beginning because it's a new program. So it's based on people's adjusted gross income and it's verified through the Idaho Tax Commission based on their prior year tax return, state tax return. So that was kind of something that we had to highlight in the beginning. So for the 2022, 2023 program, it would be based on your 2021 return. And so moving forward, it's going to be on 2022. And that process has to be verified through the vendor and the Idaho Tax Commission. It can't just be something that you say you want to upload your return. It's a process that is actually verified between those two parties. So that's one thing. The other big eligibility point is that it's available to anybody that is kindergarten through grade 12. So we can verify here at the State Board of Education through our IT service, whether or not a student is enrolled in a public or a public charter school. We have those records. But if they're a homeschool student or they are a private school student, we would just need verification. Like if it's just on the age range, then we would get that document from the parent. They can upload it in the system. Or something like from the public school saying, yes, they are enrolled in the school. So once we have those two items moving forward, then we can work through the actual award process. When we started the process of distributing grants, it first went through the AGI or the adjusted gross income for those that are 60,000 and below. So they got awarded first. And then it went from 75 and under. And then once we hit the final phase, it was open up to everyone more than 75. So those are like the three kind of wave categories that you'll see referenced a lot here.
Heather, I have a question
Sure.
on the waves. Is there a defined timeline for what wave 1? It's within this window, then that window closes, or it stays open, but then wave 2 opens up?
So when we first distributed funds for wave 1, then there's like a time clock. And so then within 30 days, we have to move into the next wave.
Okay,
That's the statute.
But wave 1 stays open.
Yes,
You
we
just
always
open,
take,
okay,
yeah,
but
we just,
and it's 30
yeah.
days.
Yeah, and then when we hit the final wave, it's on a first come, first serve basis.
Okay.
So that's kind of like, everyone is time stamped as when they entered into the system, and they are like, the term we were using throughout the process is like wholly approved. So once you're completely verified, that's when you're stamped as eligible to be awarded.
So when do you first start that process then for whichever year?
Well, for moving forward, once we open up the application.
And that happens?
To be determined on when we're gonna do it moving forward, because we're in a process of finalizing the request for proposal to get a vendor in place moving forward now that we have the continued funds.
When did it open for this last round?
It opened in September.
Okay.
So if we look at this, if you wanna scroll down, and this is kind of how it breaks down, like what happened and how it got awarded. So we opened up the application process in September and we officially closed it, and it was like mid-April. So that's kind of the window when we were receiving and awarding applications. We, as a total, we got over 37,000 applications. And out of those, about 72% were funded. And an application can have, so that's like a family, and you can have 1 to 3 children that are gonna be awarded within that application. And then the next note on there is how many were not funded or rejected. So that could be, were ineligible, they were denied because they didn't meet the criteria, or they just didn't get in before we distributed all the funds. It's a limited funded program. You have a question?
Yes, thank you. So I noticed on the frequently asked questions, it says if you want to appeal the denial of your application, they would email that to you.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell us how many appeals came through and what decision process there was?
Bring that number, but that's a great question. I probably had like, I'm just trying to envision that spreadsheet, like 20 to 30 appeals, but a lot of the appeals couldn't move forward because in order to appeal, you had to be eligible for the program. So within the statute, it is based on the verification of your adjusted gross income through the Idaho Tax Commission. So if you did not file a state tax return, then you're not eligible and you cannot appeal. Or if your student wasn't within the K to 12 age range, then there's nothing that the state board could do. We did get one appeal that was based on not being notified in a timely manner from Odyssey, and we move forward and we're going to award that request. Because if you never got notified that you were denied, then how could you follow up and how could you contact me, kind of sort of thing. But at this point, there really aren't that many denial and appeals sitting out there.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
It does. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Quick question.
Mhm.
So each student is eligible for $1,000,
Mhm.
but 3,000 cap per family.
Correct,
So you
yes.
said 3 students per family. So my question, it's kind of a detail, but say if you want to use the money for 5, so you have 5 children. Can they use the 3,000 over that 5 children?
So they get an award, $1,000 to $3,000 to
Right.
spend on the students that were listed on the application. So are you asking me if they decide to purchase something else for within the there would be no way of us really knowing, like,
Right.
if another child like access that computer. I mean,
But let's say they're purchasing curriculum or therapy. Can they
Yeah.
spread that out over the 5 children? I heard you say 3 kids.
yeah, the max award is $3,000.
Right, that's why.
So, yeah, I
Can the
mean,
3,000 be spread out over
Yeah,
more than
we
3
would
children?
not really know what they're doing within their own household.
Okay, that's
so,
what I'm
yeah,
asking, I guess. So
yeah.
that would be okay.
Yeah, I mean, because the State Board of Education really
We
couldn't
wouldn't know.
monitor, like, yeah.
So in the
right.
application process, I heard you say something about names of the students or your child.
Mhm.
So when someone applies, then you would put, I'm applying and here are the 3 children
Yeah.
that I have. And so that's how they could get the maximum award. Could they put the names of their 5 children on there
Correct.
to get the
and-
max, and they could still get the 3,000?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, so they could put 5 children down, but we are only gonna award up to 3.
So in
And
that case,
each-
they could.
Yeah, and each award is like tied to a specific student, like within our tracking system. So
Okay.
like Susie Smith applies, she has her 3 children, and we are approving 1,000, and it's based on each student. So all the money going out is tied to a specific student. And so even if you had 5 kids on there, then it would only be designated for the first 3 that are eligible. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm just questioning. There's no violation for a family to use Susie's $1,000 and split it up between Scott, Sam, and Susie.
Like, I mean, I guess, yeah. And
Can you
ask a
hear me?
question in a different
Sure.
way? So if you have a first, second, and third grader, and then a 10th and 12th grader, but your first 3 kids are awarded that grant, but you're getting a tutor that's like a science level tutor or an AP tutor, would that be a violation?
I mean, I don't know how the State Board of Education would monitor to that detail what is going on within the household. So that's where I'm kind of struggling with as a violation.
I think, hang on just real quick. Jen Thompson, I think you are online. Is that?
She's muted. Let's see if she.
Okay.
wants to unmute.
Does it make sense what I'm asking?
100%.
Yeah, and I
I know
don't mean
the
to
family-
be
no,
vague,
no.
I just don't know how we would monitor
Yeah.
in that detail, like what's going on. Cause it's empowering parents to spend the money to assist their students
Right, and
within
I
their
don't-
home.
And the parents aren't trying to do anything, I don't believe in,
No.
none of us would
No,
be trying to
but-
do anything in
But that is
violation, we just
it's a
don't
good
want them.
question. Sure.
Mhm.
We wanna
Let's see,
protect them.
Jen, have you got something to add here?
I'm not
Or
sure.
help?
Can you hear me okay?
Not really, but let's see if we can figure out how to turn
I'm
this
not
up.
sure if
Hang on just 1 minute, we'll get it turned up.
I'm in the middle of nowhere, so I apologize.
Oh, there we go. There we
Is that
go.
better?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Please
thank you.
jump in.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So I was just going to say, I think, Heather, for like the purchases of, say, occupational therapy or something like that, those are directly connected to an eligible child. But I think, but the other piece of that, like a computer or something that you're going to, equipment you're going to have in your household, there's no way to monitor that. But I think if it's a specific service, like a therapy service for a child, it has to be connected to an eligible child. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, that would make sense because that would be like invoiced through a physical therapist for a specific kid. That would make sense.
Laura?
Can I have 5 eligible children, but only get, like, my household is only gonna get that $3,000 of an award, but all my kids are still eligible?
Correct, but you would only get $3,000.
Right, but then
max.
if all of my kids are eligible and I get my $3,000, I could divide it by 5 and spend it on all my children still, correct? Or that is something
I
that
think
we
Jen
can help?
maybe-
That's part of
Clarify.
what we're talking
Yeah.
about here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly the question.
Right.
Absolutely. Jen, have you got something on that?
Nope. I was just going to say that is a really great question.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
So we'll look into that question, is what I'm hearing.
Well, yes,
I
yeah,
like that.
I think
That's
how
great.
we talk about that and that's a great first first place on how do we want to talk about this program? What does that mean? What does that look like? So that's perfect. Okay, thank you. Keep going.
So to date, we've had 49,429 students awarded, and we have dispersed the funds. And then there's a breakdown there on how those funded students are for those waves, so those adjusted gross incomes, like how, so you can kind of see like what families the program is serving throughout the state. So about like 72% is within that wave 1. And then it goes, the second wave is like really close to the first wave. I mean, I know it's such a small percentage, but it's just an additional 5,000 you'll see the 60 to the 75. And then that third wave is about 23% that was funded.
Heather, once a family is notified that they are eligible, what's the wait time or what's the time between the notification to when funds are available?
That is dependent on a couple things. So you would be determined as eligible. You would be notified from Odyssey or the vendor that you are eligible and you're going to receive that award. The parents need to sign off on an acknowledgement that they're kind of abiding by the terms of the program. And then once that's all in place, then you would get the funding. So I think,
let's say that a parent was right on top of it and they saw the email as soon as, or responded to the email as soon as they received it. Because I know sometimes people don't get to their emails. Let's just make an assumption that a parent was responsive as soon as they saw something. Weeks, a week, and maybe that's something Joe, that maybe is a Joe question, but. Okay.
Yeah, like within the platform. I mean, I would say like as soon as they sign off on that parent acknowledgement, it's pretty instantaneous, correct, Joe, that they would receive access to those funds, because at that point, the state has already signed off on the invoicing on our end, and we've moved the money over, and so they would be ready to actually
Okay.
put that money into
We'll,
their
Joe,
account.
we'll save that as a question for you, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Barbara?
Hi, just looking at that wave 1, wave 2, wave 3 data, but going back to what you said earlier, so we can't necessarily assume that wave 3 only went to those above the AGI requirements, because it kind of is encompassing maybe that, from what I understood, to back up, wave 1 was for those with AGI under 60,000, and then it moved up a little bit for wave 2, but that still encompasses those with the AGI under 60,000. So wave 3, I just want to make sure I'm not looking at that saying, wow, it looks like 25% went to those who did qualify for the first 2 AGI requirements, because they might still include those with the lower requirements.
That's a good point.
Does that make sense?
Is there a way to break that out on wave 3?
So,
Or is it representative of that? I'm just curious.
so these numbers right down on the bottom, this is what we're looking at, correct?
Mhm.
So those are the people that have been funded. So the 35,772 are all below $60,000.
Okay, so it's not
Yes.
just by the wave, but by the requirement.
Yes, so
Okay.
when we talk about waves, and it is a little confusing, so for me, when I started, how we award out, we did in waves, but then these are specific to the AGI categories
Okay.
on this report. So these numbers are correct. So wave 2 is that group of people that are from 60,000 to 75,000. And then wave 3 for that area right there are those people that are more than 75,000.
Okay, and I apologize, now I'm looking at the bold. I was
Yeah.
just looking at the wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, and wanted to make sure I was.
But when we
analyzing
talk
it
about
appropriately.
like our final wave is the first come, first serve, then correct, it could have been
And
anyone
that's what was in my
within,
head.
yeah,
Okay,
understood.
no, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for clarifying that.
Good questions.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
My first one is with regards to the waves. So if someone that fell below in the wave 1 category of funding, would you give them priority because they were below that threshold, the 60,000, regardless of when they came in? Because I can understand doing first come, first serve for those people in the higher socioeconomic demographic, but for those people in the lowest socioeconomic demographic, would you prioritize theirs to the front of the line, depending on
So
when they
once we
enrolled?
hit that third that final distribution, it was just first come, first serve.
Okay. And then my
That could be a
second,
consideration for this group.
yes. And then the other thing that I'm concerned about is in the terms, when they accept their grant, does the terms dictate isn't there some language in that with regards to where the fund should be allocated and to which student they should be allocated? I would just imagine that there would be some kind of language in there with regards to the recipients.
The language is more that they're agreeing to spend it on eligible expenses.
Just
That's-
expenses, not necessarily
Yeah, it
eligible
doesn't,
children.
it doesn't
Okay.
say anything about
Okay.
the specific children.
Okay.
Yeah.
That might be something that should be clarified too in the language. Mhm.
I have one.
Jason?
So there's no specifics like for an IEP student or a deaf or blind student that would move them up regardless of their family's stature?
No.
Okay.
That is something that I have received from some public queries and maybe that's something that you guys would like to talk about moving forward, that, should special education students receive like some additional
Priority or
priority.
something like that. Barbara?
And I may be jumping ahead, but one of the things that I was wondering is if a student is awarded, say, 2022, 2023, can they also reapply for the following year?
Yes.
Okay.
I get that question a lot.
So a parent could apply if their child's starting kindergarten, they could apply every year, so long as they fit the eligibility requirements, but there's no limit that says, hey, you've done this 3 years in a row, you're now kicked out. Okay.
Debbie, could I clarify that?
Yes, please,
Just
Matt.
Introduce myself. I'm Matt Freeman with the State Board of Education. That is a specific question that we asked the legislative sponsors because it's not clear in the statute. And so they had said that they want to run or amend legislation next year to clarify that that you would be eligible each year.
Okay,
Just because you got it once wouldn't
Thank you.
rule you out.
okay. And that could be a potential recommendation that
Yeah.
goes to the board from this group as
Yeah,
well.
that'd be great.
Okay.
Can you remind us who the legislative sponsors were?
It was Representative Wendy Horman from Idaho Falls and Senator Lori Hartog from Oregon.
Thank you.
And Matt, maybe we tackled that other question. I think we're good for a minute. Are you hanging out in here for a minute? Perfect. All right, Heather, keep.
So then
Keep us
moving
going.
forward, we've broken down how the funds were distributed throughout the educational regions. And you can see that there with the most funds in Region 3, which is the Treasure Valley, right?
If you think of Meridian as kind of Region 3 is McCall to Meridian, and a little bit of Marsing, almost to Mountain Home. That's kind of that chunk. of
I'm so
Region
glad
3.
you're here for this, because I was looking on a map, I was like, I'm like a meteorologist, like, and then the magic, I know. And then the next largest one would have been Region 6. So that is
Idaho
Magic
Falls.
Valley?
No, that's
No.
Idaho Falls area, Rexburg. That would be like Clark County, Madison County, Idaho Falls, Teton.
Do you know percentages on per student capita on that? Do you have any idea?
What's the question then?
Percentages on per student capita, like?
Like how many students are in those
Right,
regions?
yeah, like,
Oh,
are we doing?
I'm sure we
Oh,
could
Are we
get
doing
that.
a good
I mean,
job
that's
on-
part of that. What else would you like to look
Right,
at as we
yeah.
consider? Okay.
That would be.
How many
interesting.
students?
How many
I'd be
students are in
curious
the
about that.
regions?
So I can tell you an interesting statistic, and we can map it out better, but 58% of all of our Idaho students, which there's like 319-ish thousand K-12 students, 58% of that live in 16 school districts. So there's 16 LEAs, local education authorities. Isn't that, I mean, that's, anyway, an interesting number. And so we can kind of break that out.
Yeah.
Barbara?
And I love data. So a couple of things that popped into my head as I was reviewing this data earlier also is I think kind of piggybacks on what Amy was asking is, it'd be interesting to see the percentage of the students that applied and were awarded by the region. And then maybe also break that down on, of those, which were homeschooled or private schooled or private. Because I just think about making sure that the program is properly noticed to different communities and kind of seeing who's.
Do you have that kind of breakdown?
So then
Heather?
this next one broken down, the next one meaning homeschool, private school, public charter school, traditional, but then broken down by the regions
By the
as well,
regions.
is what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then
Yeah.
on, and then also kind of putting the amount of eligible students in that region. Just to
I
really
see.
kind of dive into the data
It's
to see
context,
who's
it's
using it.
context
Yeah.
around the
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we would not have data on, homeschool or private school students, so.
In terms of how many there are and how
Right,
many,
right.
right, I'd say.
It would be more of a,
public.
like a population count, maybe some.
I think they're
don't know.
looking for like how many private school students we funded in Region 2 or region,
But
right?
what
I
I'm
think-
also hearing is that other layer of who would have been eligible
Right.
in there. So if
Oh,
we
I
looked at
see.
some sort of census
Census
But
data.
we- You're right,
data,
we
we
might
could do
only know
something
from-
like that.
We might only know from public charter school and public schools, but not the homeschool or
Right.
even the private. schools.
But again, looking at some census data,
Yep.
which is only a year old at this point, it would at least give an idea
Yep.
of that.
Okay.
I guess I'm curious because I'm wondering, are we leaving, and not intentionally, of course, but as we're looking at this, are there counties or regions that we're maybe missing? Like we could focus on getting this information to,
Oh, for sure.
that's not hearing about it.
And I'm specifically looking at, Region 1 and knowing the boundary's so small and even Bonner County is so small in the school districts, but then wondering, well, how much of that actually got into the Coeur d'Alene school
Right.
districts? And maybe we're missing out on
Right,
that northern
versus-
two counties.
right.
It's just sort of data jumping.
Could you manipulate the data to show how many families were Spanish speaking that applied for these grants? Where English wasn't their first language?
Is that a question on the
That's not a question
application?
on the application.
I
We
would
do
just-
provide the information in Spanish, and Odyssey has that support through their like help desk, but no, that's not something that we've tracked yet. I mean, if that's something that we would want to include in the next application process, we could do that if that would be beneficial.
It's just more data.
Something for us to consider, you know, as we look at it.
And
Yes,
It'd be
Laura?
interesting to see income wise per region too, like what number of each wave in each region. Is that something we could
Okay,
just, so we have all
way
the
to break that
data?
out,
Yeah, to see.
to see the income, the average income of the region.
Well, like in region one, how
Who was
many awarded
How
through
many
wave one or
wave
two?
two,
Oh,
wave
okay,
three,
okay.
yeah.
Just
I got the
Okay.
sense, like, just to break it down,
Thank you.
those numbers per region, I got that.
No, this is, and this is what this is for. We knew this would come up. So Jason?
One quick thing. So Region 3 is vastly different between West Data and Bruno Grandview.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I would like to see is more a rural school to a urban school breakdown. And maybe make the line, even if it's 800 students or whatever on a public side, is where the money's going that way.
So then within the tracking system here,
I'm trying to think of how to distinguish that.
yeah, like it would only be possible on our public schools and public charter schools, and then we would have to know which of those schools are a rural school, like,
You might be
Well,
and by
able,
what definition?
Jen?
sorry, I was just thinking, I'm not sure if we collect home address, but we could pinpoint
Thinking
the
zip code. Yeah,
and overlay.
either through zip code or a
County
school.
code.
And I think we know what, or a county code.
Mhm.
Yeah, there you go. And I think,
We do have zip code, so.
okay, I think we would know enough to know. I mean, when we see a school name, we know that that's rural and anyway.
Mhm.
So then maybe that's a better approach, is sorting the data by school name? If you guys know what your.
However you can get us
Or
there.
district.
How about there?
I like that. No, I like
County.
school name.
Yeah.
School name.
Just county encompasses
I-
our school.
Heather, I think, typically, we collect data by LEA, so by district or charter school.
Mhm.
Um,
And we have all those in there, the numbers. And the
Right, so that
districts,
would
yeah.
be,
Okay,
I
we
mean,
could
I think
sort that
getting
way.
down to individual school buildings would be overwhelming.
I was thinking
Yeah.
district.
District,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So district. Okay. Any other thoughts on that before we go?
I think really the goal would just be for us to find out,
More specific data on how it
Right.
breaks down.
are there districts, maybe students that we could reach that aren't hearing about the program?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the first thing that jumped out to me was, are the rural districts, getting that benefit as much as maybe the urban districts?
Mhm.
Just knowing that there's, and kind of interested to see which ones are using some of the different categories.
Yes.
I think of our rural districts, just getting internet, trying to have 2
Yes.
kids streaming.
Mhm.
When that was our need, but still just sort of interesting to who's, what different districts see as more valuable to those kids and those students, because it's got to be different for each region and district.
For
Yes.
sure, it is.
It's really good information to have.
Yeah, and I think just overall, the communication and outreach for the program is something to think about and talk about moving forward. I think having this parent advisory committee established is gonna help in that regard. And you guys are gonna do this like roadshow kinda of this
That's right.
program. And so I think a lot more people are gonna be aware that the opportunity is out there. Prior to the application launching this fall, like I did work with the State Department of Education and, sent out communication to all the guidance counselors. I reached out to the special ed directors, so that is happening. But I think this whole committee and really taking it throughout the state is just gonna get the awareness so people know, because I still get emails and calls to this day, like, I just found out about this program. So this is gonna be really beneficial, so we can reach those people that maybe you guys think are not, being reached right now. So I think this is great. So this is how it's all broken down. So the parent actually has their money, right, their award, and they have to spend it on the online marketplace, and that is established through the vendor, and our vendor right now is Odyssey. So the parents would log on and they have to, spend it there. They cannot get a reimbursement. That's not this program. It was for the strong families, strong students, but that is not an option right now for this program. They spend all of their money on the online marketplace. And if you scroll down, you'll just see how the purchases are broken down. So we have the statutory categories, right? What they're allowed to spend the money on. And this report was from May 15th, and that was $27,593 had been spent. Currently, we stand at, we're over that. Currently, we're at I think we're up to 55% is spent out. So when I say spent out, I mean, we've given all the money to all the parents. And then now we track how they're spending it and how they're spending that down, because parents have 2 years from when they receive their award to spend the funds. If they don't within that 24-month time, it just comes back to the State Board of Education. So I'm just kind of mindful, monitoring, where are we at? Where's the money? And we're started even messaging to parents, just a reminder, you have the money, right? Let's spend the money. Because we do have it on within this program, and it was a federally funded program, and moving forward, it's a state funded program. So, and we have the RFP out there and the process of, the platform. And I get the next question a lot, is the money going to kind of roll over, right? So I've gotten my $2,000, so can I just use that next year? You know what I mean? If I apply again, I'll have $4,000 combined. And I don't know the logistics of that yet. So, because we'll have to work out, federally funded, state funded, so just
I guess that's an interesting question, which is if you can, and it's going to be more explicit that you can apply every year, and you have 2 years to do it, you would potentially, if you didn't spend it that first year, you would have money. Yeah, I mean, based on what you've just described, I mean, there aren't any rules against it. Matt, am I missing something there? I mean, so that may be something for this group. I mean, if you apply and you haven't spent your money, what does that look like? I don't know, but what does that mean? So if you have, you haven't spent your funds. So
yeah, I mean, if you do have the 24 months, it's going to just be a tracking process with it on our end, the State Board of Education's end, how we monitor that. But
yeah, it will require, keeping the federal and state funding buckets separated. So that will be a little complicated.
But it'll be complicated on the administrator side.
Correct. Yes.
But as far as the family is concerned, the monies are there. It's just what funding stream is gonna, take care of that in the marketplace. So.
And I only raised it just because I get this question.
No, it's good because.
So I figured you guys might get the question.
Yeah. It's good to know.
I had two, and my question was, do you have the resources you need? Because that could be, you start with a kindergartner, say you have your 3,000 for your family, every 2 years, that 3,000, if you're gonna have to keep track of, okay, I have this 3,000, it's gonna expire. And then I have that new 3,000, and that's revolving. The family's really going to need to keep track of that, but yet, do you have the resources you need here? Because you're keeping track of every family doing that.
Well, we have a sample of one, so.
That's what that's my note,
So
because I was
Matt
guessing that was probably the case. So do we need to be looking at that as a
recommendation. Yeah.
that, do you really have the resources you need to keep that
I
going?
think everything's on the table for a recommendation as far as how the program works, which would include the administration.
Right?
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Mine's a new question. So if you have something.
Well, Heather just mentioned in passing that with the Strong Family, Strong Students, that for that program.
The first iteration.
The first iteration, yeah, that reimbursements were allowed. Please don't recommend that. It was an administrative nightmare. We had literally 5 auditors auditing all of these requests for reimbursement to check for fraud, and it was horrendous. So the program needs to be using an online platform. That's where parents can purchase it. I know that some parents feel like they can get that product cheaper somewhere else. Well, this is free money, so you can't complain about free money.
I will add that the reason for the reimbursement that first year was because we were in November of the school year when we were saying, hey, this money's available. Many parents had already purchased the internet, were paying for it, had already purchased their computer when the school said, here's a device. And so the thinking for that specific year, it was very specific to the fact that no one knew what we were doing. I mean, getting into school, parents had made investments into things, and now here these programs are available. And so it felt right to say, look, if you bought a computer for your child in the summer because you didn't know what was going to be happening at your school, and they showed up on the first day and were given a laptop, we're going to help with that. But beyond that, that after that first year, it also proved to be very challenging. So just as a note of history, Courtney. Oh, sorry, and then Holly.
Oh, sorry. Joe might be able to speak to this more, but those categories that are 0, does that mean there's nothing in the marketplace on which
The
families can
category
spend?
that is a 0, yes, we have not
Okay.
paid for any
Services?
standardized tests. I do have a student that is looking to utilize that category. I mean, the reason why that one is 0, because we have a great program within the state of
Enhanced
Idaho.
opportunities are,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so I know my
Right.
student just I was like, how much do I pay for that AP test? Coming from a different state, and they're like, oh, it's covered. I was like,
Yeah.
fabulous. But if they had maxed that out, is why I'm thinking I have a student that's reaching out,
Okay.
so that might pop up.
Okay.
And then the other 0 is because that's other education expenses and services as approved by the board. So this committee would look at items that they think should be included,
put in
then
there.
like what you guys discussed earlier, and then it goes up to the State Board of Education and that, so then that final one might start being populated.
Okay. Thank you.
Holly.
Thank you. My question, the largest question I have about this whole program is that section B there, a large portion, $6.5 million is for textbooks, curriculum, other instructional materials, including educational software and applications. To me, that seems like the actual physical material that's being provided to the student. There's a lot of things on the marketplace right now that are actual instruction, music lessons, driver's education, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. That's falling under A.
It is,
Mhm.
okay. And can you explain to us how those categories are assigned and what that process is and how those become approved?
So A is computer hardware, internet, self-explanatory, right? And then any other technological devices or services, and that's where we put in the classes. We just met those moons ago. I'm looking at because he was a part of that conversation, a lot of the classes, if your child wants to do an art class, that's the category we put it under, because we felt like it would fall for services. And just speaking to that, the State Board of Education is given the categories, and we just had to be very mindful, it has to fit into this, in one of these, letters. So then yes, textbooks, curriculum, materials. So if you are a parent that is homeschooling, you want to purchase curriculum to teach your child, and it would fall under that, or just, books, right? or software and applications. So like if there's like an educational application that your student, I was a special education teacher, so we use those a lot, like tons of applications out there. The fees we talked about, and then therapies, so occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech language, mental health services. So all that would be in there. And the only thing that's kind of note about that category is that they have to be licensed in the state of Idaho. Like they have to be, you have to be licensed, and there's within the occupational, they all have a website where they can go and verify those. The E is a question that is tricky and get lots of questions about. So educational programs offered for a fee or pursuant to contract by a school district, public charter school, or CTE program to non-public students. So if you are a homeschool student and you want to take a class, like a driver's education class at the local school, then you could use this category. But if you are on the rolls at that school, and I hope I'm saying this, like I'm getting lots of looks like, what is she talking about?
Keep going. We're hanging with you.
I know. But say you want to take the driver's education class and you're enrolled at that school, you could not use this funding. Does that make sense?
It
Hang on
does.
one
I
second.
think
Jen,
this-
real quick.
Yeah.
You have something, I felt like you were trying to say something.
Nope, Heather's got it just right.
Okay, sorry.
I think just my question is about the interpretation of that language and who made those determinations, like how we can understand that process, because the way I read it, A seems like it's very technological.
Mhm.
And so what your interpretation of services to me seems like something that would be included on B or D in terms of the language intent, right? Like if they are instructional services, whereas I would read that as other technological devices or services like software as a service. Some sort of application is how I would read the intent of that language rather than like a music class. So I'm just I think it's just a matter of interpretation, but was there some sort of discussion or process to outline like who is approved based on these statutory categories and how those were determined?
For just the services part in particular, I think it was just the word services was in the first category, so that's where.
Heather, I can jump in a little bit.
Sure.
I think this is one of the things that I think that section F is going to be really important for us going forward, because this committee, has the opportunity to review the various things that maybe weren't anticipated initially, right? So maybe the intent was for that to be technological services, but what we're seeing is that parents are, needing to use these funds for different kinds of services. And so perhaps that's part of the conversation that this committee can have, and then make recommendations to the board to maybe clarify, what these specific categories mean, or perhaps, add additional eligible purchases to that list. I think that's part of the cleanup that I think this committee is going to be really, really helpful.
And perhaps build some definitions around, you can't cover every single thing, but there may be a way to more clearly define in this category it means. Barbara?
Heather, I think I understand E a little bit better now, and I wanted to make sure I'm
Okay.
understanding it correctly.
Yeah.
So say like the CTE program for non-students. So say you're a homeschooler, but your kid wants to take shop.
Yeah,
That kind of thing, like, okay, maybe he can take shop at the high school, but there's a fee for it because he's not a
Correct.
school student. Okay, so that makes sense now.
but then if you're enrolled at that school, the fees for whatever reason.
Right.
It wouldn't be eligible.
Okay.
So it just allows for those homeschool students to use this program to access things that they might need that they don't have an opportunity to do at home.
Right, but once you take the SHOP program, you're considered dual enrolled, so it no longer applies.
Oh, is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, because you become enrolled in that class.
Yeah, I was on that.
Well, let's,
Okay.
okay, well, let's write that down. I mean, that,
And just when I thought I had it.
you do, but I think there's a complication with that is unintended
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
in that. So that's
I
important.
think going off of what she's talking about though, on the categories, it seems misleading that A is computer hardware and the actual devices that you're using, but you're also throwing in certain classes. That seems like it should be down more on textbooks and curriculum or educational programs.
Well, I think what Jen said
So
is
it
great, like
changes
you
the
guys have
numbers.
the ability to just flesh
Right.
out F. I mean, the statute is the statute. I mean, there's
Mhm.
not much that we all can do
Yes.
with how it was written. It is code, but you can totally impact F. Like that is within this group's ability. So if you wanted to clearly define how you see classes, I mean, I guess that's, that's on the
Absolutely.
table. So then you
Absolutely.
could make F to be, recommend what you wish it to be to the
Or
board.
create other categories or collapse some. I think with the statutory categories here, we can take a look and say, this is how we would recommend that the categories be spelled out. That, that's something we do. Matt, did you have a, I'm sorry, I thought I saw a hand.
I was gonna say also, there are homeschool kids that use the special ed services from the public school. Might be something we wanna look at with that dual enrollment.
Does that make them ineligible or ineligible
Yeah,
on the second year?
yeah, just maybe some technicalities we wanna look at as we.
Jason?
Okay, I would like to go back to the spending of the money. So we spent down 27.5 million of the close to 50 million, correct?
Mhm.
How, something I would like to know going forward is how much of that has had zero money spent out of their account and how much is like under $100 left or a certain amount that's left in that account. And then if that's a situation where we have a lot of people that has a very small amount, we need to have an option where either they can give that money back, so it can be redistributed in a whole to a deserving kid or something to that effect. Because I know my account has like $27 sitting in it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go try to find something that I can make that work because it's a kind of a hassle to spend it down anyways. And so I know that, so I'm getting emails saying, hey, you still have money left in your account. I was like, well, there's not a lot. It's like, so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's some of the communication we started was to spend down, but we could definitely add within that communication. And if you want to return the remainder of your funds, you could just notify Odyssey and
Something
we
we
could
could
send
talk
that
about
back.
here.
That's easy to do.
Yeah, and then I guess added to that, I know we've given you a long list of data points for us. I think, for Jason, where are we with, hey, 40% of our parents have spent 90% of their money. or
Correct, and I've
something
already
like that.
been having those conversations.
Great.
Yeah, moving forward, like, what does it look like? Cause I look, I'm like, oh, they have $20. So, and I think that's also maybe in the back of some parents' heads, they're like, well, if I am eligible to apply for this again, would it roll over? I don't know. So, yeah,
Well,
but
I guess that's another question. If you do have that $27, but you apply again and you get 1,000, 3,000, whatever, did those get combined?
Do they accrue?
Yeah, okay. All right.
And then I had one more question.
And then we'll
This
move
would be
on
a
to Joe.
big undertaking, I'm sure. However, these textbooks, some of this curriculum, my teacher brain is saying some of these could be used again by other people. Of course, a big undertaking. However, what do these people do with these textbooks when they're done with them? And is there an incentive for us to do something with these? I mean, of course, they're theirs. They bought them, right? But
Yeah.
These are, I'm thinking all these textbooks I have at home, could there be some incentive for us to look at eventually?
like a buyback program.
Right. I don't know, just something for us to think about, set aside, because this might be a great resource for us to use these some way somehow, not everything, of course, but some of these instructional materials and textbooks, they use them once and then,
Right. And maybe it just comes down to them posting on their own Facebook page. Hey, I've got some free,
right,
books available,
but this
to
is a lot
somebody
of
that-
money we've spent.
Or encouraging them to donate to their local LEA.
Yeah,
Right.
there you go. Or library or
Right.
something
Library.
like that.
You know, but I mean, it's a lot of money we've spent. If we were really wise, we would
Reuse.
like that curriculum library that we
Yeah.
talked about.
Okay.
I don't know, just something to
Yeah.
put on the
Okay.
back burner and think
I
about.
like it. Holly?
Just want to thank you for all this data. It's
Oh, yeah.
very, very helpful. I assumed when I was like formulating my questions that some of those services were in F and then to see zeros there. So that was so helpful to know these categories. My only last question is there a process that exists now for the board to approve other education expenses in category F? Like, do you have a meeting set aside for this?
This is the process for F.
Okay.
This group convenes to come up with their suggestions to take to the State Board of Education, the meeting. This is the process for F, so.
And the state board meets every other month. So this would just be an agenda item on a state board meeting to take up those recommendations.
Which we're eyeing October.
Yeah.
So. All right.
I have one more comment. So there was some language used earlier about this being free money. And I think in the essence of that, in the efforts to empower parents, there still needs to be fiscal responsibility, because this is a lot of money. And just to ensure that things really are legitimate purchases and we're not double dipping on taxpayers' backs, that they are already funding public school systems and that we're not having them refund services that are available at the public schools. I just think there needs to be more fiscal accountability, because it is free money. But looking at the marketplace, some things are horribly overpriced.
Okay.
And so just having more competition within the marketplace to ensure that we're not gouging people and having them spend exorbitant fees on something that is much.
That's available
Uh-huh,
maybe in their own
uh-huh.
community.
Yes, because it is
They
free
can
money,
access.
but nothing
Okay.
in life is free.
Right. Well, no. Okay. Thank you for that.
Would you take a question from a non-member?
Not at this meeting, but we would be happy to have you address the committee at the next, or the panel at the next meeting. We weren't set up to take public comment at this one. So thank you. And now we're coming up with a system for written questions and written everything. And so we'll be able to help you with that. Why don't we move on then to Joe? And so thank you, Heather, very much. And
Thank you.
we look forward to bulleting you with lots more data and questions, but this will be really instructive for us as we go on to the next meeting. And so now, after we've gone through the process of how and what what the eligibilities and all of that, and now we'll ask Joe to walk us through what happens now. It's been verified, and Odyssey, in this case, who is the vendor for our state, is now going to notify the parent. So Joe, if you'll take it from there.
Absolutely. So once we have helped the state with application processing, and as Heather indicated, we're verifying students and parents on kind of two different aspects. The first is that we're verifying parents' information by using their 2021 Idaho tax return. We also then work to verify student information with the Idaho State Board of Education. So for public school students, we do have that. And then for students outside the public school system, we need to request that information be provided, and then we manually review that. Stepping back, I did want to just kind of do a quick overview. I know that time is tight, so I'll keep it short. But my background is I've been in education in K through 12 for 13 years. In that time, I've been a teacher and a school leader. Also have worked as an attorney in the education and regulatory space. So this is a very important mission for our company and for myself personally. And our company, Odyssey, helps states administer microgrants, such as in Idaho, and in other states, we administer other programs. Right now, we are in 3 states. And this year, we are on track to distribute about $175 million. The things that we help in the Idaho for the Idaho Empowering Parents program are kind of 6 different items. So the first is outreach to parents and vendors to make them aware of the platform and the program. The second is application processing and identity verification. which Heather covered in detail. The fourth is marketplace creation, so actually putting the vendors in and approving, and we'll go through exactly what that looks like in a moment. The fifth is payment processing, and then the sixth is data retention. So all the data that Heather shared with you comes directly from our system, and we provide it for the state to be able to digest and analyze. So jumping into the superintendent's question, what happens once a parent has been approved is that as soon as the funds are received by Odyssey in the trust account that we've set up, we then actually have a distribution system where all of the funds are immediately provided to the parents, which means that in each parent's wallet balance, they then can see the amount of money that has been allocated for them. So if they have been approved for 3 children, they would receive $3,000 and they would receive that in their account. At that time, they're then able to spend it in the marketplace. And so we'll go into exactly how we set up the marketplace so that we can kind of discuss that. But Odyssey's payment system and the way that we've set up the system for Idaho under their close supervision and guidance is a closed payment system, which means that every single vendor, service offering, and transaction is reviewed and approved. Specifically, all vendors are reviewed by Idaho State Board of Education after having been previously vetted by us, and we'll walk through what that process looks like. So vendor vetting happens in a multi-step process. So each vendor, and a vendor, for those of you unfamiliar, could be anything from a tutoring center to perhaps an e-commerce shop to a behavioral therapist, is required to submit documents demonstrating that they are a registered legal entity and in good standing. So that could be a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC. They also must provide information about the products or services that they plan to provide for the program. And then they need to provide information to demonstrate that they have previously provided those same services or goods. Once we receive that information from the vendors, each vendor is vetted individually. We look at all of the past information for that vendor. And then once we have determined that they are in good standing, that they have previously provided those services, and that they have the ability to provide those services in Idaho, does IDSBOE make the final determination on whether or not they're allowed into the marketplace. So all determinations in that case are supervised and under the close supervision of IDSBOE. Once the vendor has been approved, they then actually have their service offerings reviewed. So at this stage, there is a distinction between the vendor itself, which is the legal entity providing the services, and then the services that are being provided. So a good example of this would be, for example, a tutoring center may be approved as a vendor, and then they would have individual service offerings underneath that. Each service offering is also approved by us as well as by the Idaho State Board of Education. As Heather mentioned, certain services and vendors are required to provide licensing and credential, and that is part of the review process, that we actually require that information to be submitted and that to be reviewed and confirm that it's accurate and valid before they're actually allowed into the marketplace. Once we have done that, we allow parents to make purchases from those vendors. All of the purchases are available to the state administrators to access both in real time and historical data. So our historical data is constantly available to the Idaho State Board of Education. We do provide them with daily reports on all of the transaction activity that's happening in the marketplace, so they're aware on a daily basis the amount of volume that's going through. There's also a granular look where each individual transaction as sent by one parent to one vendor is able to be reviewed and approved. And so all of that information is available. And then if there is any suspicion of fraud, the Odyssey platform is able to take a number of steps through the platform. All of these would be guided by Idaho State Board of Education and under their guidance, but we are able to suspend parents from the platform, suspend vendors from the platform, require parents to return items, requires vendors to refund parents' account, or remove a parent from the account, or remove a vendor from the platform. So that's kind of a quick overview of the marketplace and the vendor vetting process, as well as the transaction approval process. So I'm happy to kind of pause there for questions about that. There's also some additional details about the program, I'm happy to share in terms of amount of money, applications, et cetera, that have been processed to date.
Questions?
I have a question, Joe.
Sure.
The question is, when a vendor is approved to be on the marketplace, are you assigning any sort of data that gives a delineation of the statutory category that they fit under for those services? Like, is that reportable information?
So currently the answer is no. What happens is as service offerings come in and the data is generated in a report, we then, under IDSVOE's guidance, assign it a certain category. And so that's where you're actually able to get the data that Heather previously provided as to which category each thing falls into. So I think one important thing to note is each vendor could be offering services that might be in different categories. And so it's done at the point after the transaction has settled, and then it's assigned a category.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.
Barbara.
Hi, Joe. Thank you for the information. You mentioned a trust account. Is that trust account interest bearing?
The account that we hold is interest bearing. Yes.
Okay.
Joe, I have a question. Where you're not living in the
Sure.
state of Idaho, how do you know what services are available in our communities so that we can advocate for more services in rural areas, especially to be available to the marketplace?
Yes. Yeah, it's a great question. So we get a lot of feedback directly from parents and guardians. And so one thing that we have made a huge effort on is being able to make sure that we have vendors that are useful and parents are able to utilize in state. And so we do have at this moment over 403 approved vendors in the marketplace. The number of services would be a multiple of that because each vendor usually typically offers a few services. The vast majority, so over 300 of those are Idaho-based small businesses. A few that we have taken great pains to make sure we have included are bookstores that are independent and located throughout the state of Idaho. Another big request that we have gotten and have worked closely to make sure we have lots of vendors are internet service providers. And so we have a number of them in the marketplace as well.
And what other states are you operating in? You mentioned 3. What were those states?
Right now, Idaho, Iowa, and Missouri.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more question, Joe. Sorry. I wondered if your platform has capability for parents to review the vendors and their satisfaction with the vendor.
We currently do not have that. If that's something that's of interest, we could put that into a roadmap to be rolled out for the parents in Idaho.
I have a question, Joe. Is there a process for parents to request vendors?
Currently, the way that works is if parents call into the customer service account and they have a vendor in mind, if they're able to provide us with contact information, we reach out directly with the sign-up link for the vendor registration process. It then follows the registration process I just laid out. So that's typically how we're able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Joe, I think for now, anyway, we're good. We know where to find you if we've got additional questions as we come up. So thank you. And thanks for sticking with us. And for those that are on Zoom, I know we got a little bit out of the order. And so we appreciate you waiting for us as we work through some things. All right. So with that, we will move on just as we kind of wrap up and kind of plan and outline what you all would like to discuss next time. And so kind of go through just a few things. We have made arrangements with the College of Southern Idaho in Twin Falls on July 10th. So I'd ask you to put that into your your calendars. And
And what is the process if we are already committed to something on that?
perhaps, would it be something you could do through Zoom, if not in person? We might be able to make, and I know that the calendaring part was challenging, and we were in trying to coordinate and locations, and so I'm gonna give you 2 more dates, and we're gonna cross fingers here and see what we can do. August 17th, that will be our Eastern Idaho, whether it's Idaho Falls or Rexburg, but in that region. And then September 21st in Lewiston. And Joni will talk about what we can figure out for you. And then, so thinking ahead to our July 10 meeting, we will incorporate public comment into the meeting. And then based on the information that you've heard today, we'll have more data. Thank you, Heather, that we can then discuss. What I'm synthesizing from our conversations, really looking at the categories and how we do. I don't even want to get into the details of how we'll talk about that, because we'll let you talk about that. But the categories, looking at the waves, and then just how parents are able to utilize the funds that are available. Perhaps looking at those amounts. What does that look like for more than 3 children? That type of thing. What else would you like to have available to you as resource or information, or a specific aspect of this program that you like to take some time talking about? Accountability piece.
I would love the accountability piece. I'd also love to see the terms and conditions of the grants, to see what the language is,
Okay.
to see what the parameters are given with regards to how they can spend it, especially with regards to the number of children in a home, like if there's any language that's speaking to that in the terms and conditions of the micro grant.
And Heather, that's something that you,
So
I'm
the
sure have at your
parent
finger.
acknowledgement that we're
Is that
talking
what the
about?
parent
Yeah,
acknowledgement that you
something that
agree
they say.
to, dot, dot, dot.
What are the
Okay.
agreements?
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I can make this a formal motion so that it's really clear for the minutes and for the expectation.
That would be fantastic.
Awesome. So I would move that we have 4 formal requests for information for our next July meeting. The first of which was just iterated about the terms and conditions and accountability. The second would be based on what Barbara's comments were about data being broken down for school type by each education region.
Okay.
The third request for information would be based on Jason's comments. We'd like a breakdown of how many accounts have not been spent at all, have had any expenditures, and how many accounts have a balance of less than $100.
Okay.
And then the fourth and final, if I miss anything, please feel free to amend or make a separate motion. But the fourth and final request for information would be a breakdown of all of the quote services that are approved in the marketplace under statutory category A. So all of the providers that are in that services category.
Okay. I would say. Okay. All right. So now we can discuss the
Now we
motion,
can
and if there are
discuss it.
amendments to the motion, or we'll coordinate.
Can we address Native American tribes? Because a lot of them don't file taxes, and so we're alienating some of our Native American students if they're not able to access these micro grants because they're not in the federal tax system.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, we can. All right. We're still discussing.
In
Yes.
terms of data, I think along with the accountability piece, I think knowing what they are currently collecting from families, because I don't know, like, language spoken at home, nationality, I don't know if those are for sure.
Okay.
something
So
that
what
are
are the
being
what pieces of
tracked.
demographic information
Do
are
we even have
okay?
to look at currently?
And maybe our motion maker would amend some of her data points to include additional. Okay.
So
Well,
moved, yes.
Okay. All right. We've added that to the motion. Yes.
And then if maybe you, Heather, could let us know if you have the resources that you need, or maybe report to us, because that's going to be important that this is handled, that you have what you need.
Okay. All right. And I think we can do that outside of the specific motion for data, but we
Okay.
can include that in as we put the agenda together. So,
Okay,
Okay.
so add that to the agenda. maybe?
yeah, if we can have that without that needing to be incorporated in the motion, but. all
Okay.
right. Other discussion on the specific motion to include those 4 points with the amendment of Laura with the demographic information that is or not collected. And Jason, will you support a second to the amended motion? Okay. Is there discussion, any more discussion on the amended motion? Well, do we need to, I gotta get my procedure. Do we need to do anything with the first motion? Matt, we're the same person amended. Are we good? Okay, all right. All in favor of the amended motion, please say aye. Aye. All right, we are in favor. And then we will talk about, we can on the agenda have the piece for accountability, current resources.
Do you need me to make a motion?
I don't think so. I think that we can just, if you would like to, I don't want to stop you, but I think we can just agree that here are things that we'd like to have addressed.
Okay.
Okay, categories. Anything else that should be on this list? This ought to be a good discussion, so.
Debbie,
Yes,
can I just share, this isn't necessarily for your agenda, this is just a data point, something that we learned in the process.
please.
Yeah, oddly enough, the statute does not require students to be Idaho residents. And so we had families who lived in border states, but whose students attended schools in Idaho. And so we had to make those
Interesting.
awards.
Okay, interesting.
So that's something that needs to be addressed.
Okay, and that could be part of really that demographic information. What are we collecting? What state do you live in? You know, something like that, that this.
So it was only a handful, but it still felt,
Well, but
it still felt
that's,
odd.
okay, right, yeah, okay. All right, we will, all right, I'm gonna just really quickly, Allison and Taylor, who I want to thank them for, they have put in a tremendous amount of work for today, everything. So do you have what you need and as far as any clarifying questions for July? Are we good?
So we'll reach out on travel and lodging and all that, and I think if everyone just filled out the travel document that Taylor provided this morning, that would be.
And feel free to hang out and get that done if you want to just do that and leave it here.
I can help anybody with those travel reimbursement forms.
All
I
right.
had a question, Madam Chair, about travel to these other locations. Is there an opportunity to attend virtually?
Absolutely.
That'd be in the best interest of
Yes.
probably people and taxpayers, right?
Yeah. Yes. And if you're, for whatever reasons, if that's your preference, we will make that happen. And we'll have that available so that as a member of the panel, that you'll have the ability through Zoom. So we have the public side where they're not participating in the meeting, but they're watching the meeting. And then we'll want you to be able to participate, to be able to go back and forth. So we will do that. That could be a personal preference to you, and we'll work it out with Taylor and Allison. All right, any other questions or thoughts or comments for the good of the order today?
One more question, I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
No,
There
don't be
is
sorry.
currently a review from the state board, an audit of sorts about fraud. Is that something we can put on the agenda for next meeting? to
Perhaps,
discuss?
Heather, so we're about 70% through. Is that, Heather, do you want to address that when that'll be ready? Because we
Yes.
will want that.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're currently reviewing the purchases that were made up until the exact date in April, towards the end of April, of everything that was bought on the platform. And I'm about 70%, yes, I am a person of one. Thank you, Matt, for pointing that out. So it's, it's 45,000 line items on an Excel spreadsheet. Super fun. But yes, I think the goal is to have that report to you guys
For the July.
meeting.
Perfect.
So you can
And
look at
ahead
those.
of that, so that you can take a look and so forth. I'm gonna add that to my list. So,
Thank you so much for all your hard work.
yes, thank you. Thanks to all of you for coming together today. I'm excited about the discussion. I think we've got a great opportunity to create what really works for us in our state, that's responsive to our families, that respects the businesses, that respects the local needs, whether it's rural or, our most urban areas. And so I really appreciate that your willingness to serve. And it's going to be, we're going to make it fun too. We'll talk about it and make it enjoyable. So with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Amy. Is there a second? Second by Barbara. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Early.
Safe.
Great job.